So let's dive into the day. And this is informal, so if you're hungry, I certainly won't be offended if you need to get up and get some more food. But let's go through the aims. Claire, will you read our first aim for us, please?
Yeah. Great school and network leaders will be able to identify instructional data practices that drive decision-making.
And Morgan.
Great school and network leaders will be able to define their vision and action plan towards exemplary data days this year.
So let's see, today I met with AF Bridgeport Middle, with Amistad Elementary, and with Amistad Elm City High. I've been meeting with schools in Brooklyn. I've got more meetings scheduled, I think 5 more schools over the next couple of days to really do some thought work and co-planning around data days. And if I'm honest with what we did last year, where we were last year, I would say we, as a network, vastly underutilized the power of our data day and our interim assessment process. We learned a lot from our observations, and we, I think, have reflected on what it takes to have a great data day. However, one of the things that we saw, or a pattern that we saw play out, and Jeff, I think, sort of clarified this understanding, what happens on data day 1 really sets the tenor for the rest of the cycle. And so we saw some schools have a strong data day 1, and by data day 2 it got stronger, by data day 3 it got stronger, and by data day 4 it was humming. And we had schools who had mediocre data day 1s, and by data day 2 it was a little more mediocre. By data day 3 we plateaued. And in worst case, we had some schools who said by data day 4 they're like, we'll have data day morning and then we're going to do PD in the afternoon, and just sort of losing the advantage of this time in this interim assessment process because they hadn't really seen a picture of excellence of what data day could be and how they can organize their staff and their teams to get there. And so one of the real pushes that we've made this year is trying to help build a picture of excellence, just like we do with our scholars. What is a top quality response? We want people to see what is a top quality day-to-day, what can excellence look like, and then help you think through how do I get there from where I am. It's not all going to magically happen by day-to-day 1, but if you start having that picture and understanding where you want to go, we really think that by day-to-day 4 you can be at a fundamentally better place than you were now, and more importantly, use that time to really drive excellence in student outcomes. So how are we going to do this? I'm going to have a very compressed section looking at a couple pieces of research, and we're going to do a mini case study. And then the bulk of the time is really going to be spent with Kate walking through what she and Morgan and their leadership team at Elm City Elementary have done over the past couple years with their day-to-day to really help look at the couple of the 5 key components that they focused on in building their day-to-day picture. It's interactive for you to ask questions, but to reflect on if this is where they are, where am I, and what would I want to change or do differently in order to get there. Questions about the purpose? Okay, so take a second. In a minute, I want you to noodle on 3 different sets of outcomes that were compiled. Ben Master, who I think a lot of you knew, did basically a meta study of some meta studies around the use of interim assessment process. And there were, well, in essence, 4 scenarios. So no interim assessment process, schools that had scenario A, schools that did scenario B, and schools that did scenario C. And those were the types of outcomes that they got compared to not doing an interim assessment process at all. Think for a second, and then I want people to share. What do you think were the contributing, what do you think the interim assessment process looked like here, or the use of, I should say, they all had a similar looking interim assessment process. What do you think the use of data looked like in scenario A versus scenario B? So what was going on that actually led to a decline in outcomes compared to not doing an interim assessment process at all? If I want to share, postulate. Katie?
I'll postulate that they gave instructional time to taking interim assessments. And so it was like they were taking away from kids' time to actually learn things, but they weren't actually using that data powerfully, so it was just a waste of time.
Anybody else? Any other postulations? Is that the right word? So that's part of it, but they took the test and all they did was tell the students, what their final score was, if they got the questions right or wrong. So a consequence is they spend a lot of time administering assessments but not really doing anything with the data. How about scenario B, 8% gains? If this was the financial industry, people would be seeing an 8% gains returns, that's great. But so what do you think was driving 8% improvement?
Some teachers did it better than others,
Did what?
looking at the data and using data to drive their decisions.
So what do you think they were doing with the data?
They were actually analyzing it and correcting their instruction or having that information inform the instruction.
Okay, so in this case, maybe teachers were actually informing their instruction with the data. Any other?
Some, yeah.
Some were.
Some.
I think time was given for teachers to discuss the data, but I don't think it was at all focused. I don't think there was like an agenda or anything where teachers felt like teachers kind of knew what they were doing. So some teachers, I think, probably were successful with it, while others might have used it to make copies for the upcoming week or whatever.
Right. So in scenario B, it wasn't even teachers doing anything with the data, but they were giving the students back the answers, and the students were told for the answers that they got wrong, here's what the right answer was. And now the students have a better picture of what they should have done right. So it was nothing that the teachers did other than better clarification for the students. 8% improvement. Okay. So 8% in grade improvement are good. We want the 34%. So what goes into the 34%? Three big things. One, the assessments first were used not as a teacher evaluation, but to help the teachers and students clarify what does excellence look like, what does top quality response and performance on these academic outcomes look like. So they're using the assessment not as a mechanism of framing this is what being proficient at these standards looks like, and measuring whether or not students are or are not able to do that work. Two, they then, to Gemma's point, they're actually using that data to diagnose when the students aren't getting the questions right, what do they and do they not understand, so that my instructional response is appropriate to that source of misunderstanding. And then three, getting the students invested, providing feedback to them so that the student understands what they do and don't understand and what their deltas are between where they are and where they need to be. So we structurally have an interim assessment process, but we are not as a network getting these types of gains. And I think it's all in our grasp in our schools to get to be here, and my goal is to help us get there. So we have, as we've been doing this research, Ben really helped clarify three enduring understandings that we have around instructional data practices. And let's do another read around. Jeff, do you want to read the first one?
Sure. At AF, excuse me, we use assessments to help clarify and then measure whether scholars have reached explicit and rigorous learning goals.
Mary?
At AF, the primary purpose of assessment data is to inform our understanding of scholars' thinking and plan the most effective instructional response.
And I've forgotten your name from New Haven. Oh, you got your mouth full. How about you?
Karen.
Karen, thank you.
At AF, gathering, reflecting on, and responding to student data ranging from exit tickets to formal assessments is a continuous and year-long instructional improvement practice.
So I want you to do a reflection. We're going to do a fist to three response here. A fist means none of these enduring understandings are entrenched in my school. A three means all three of these enduring understandings are entrenched in my school. Obviously a 1, 2, or 3 would be, or 1 or 2 would be somewhere in between. So look at the three enduring understandings, and then when I count to 3, I want everyone to hold their fist and keep it up so we can see where do we think we are. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Good math, Morgan. Okay, so some 1s and 2s. Who was a 1? Was that Luke? Which one is entrenched?
And the other two are kind of there, but I wouldn't call them entrenched.
Who? of these two, or of the three, which one do you think is the least entrenched at Amistad Elm-City? One more so than the other, or equally?
Pretty close to equally. I'm leaning towards 2 is less entrenched.
And why do you think that is?
It's some of the things we were talking about earlier. I think we've had a tendency to get overwhelmed with a number of aspects of scholars' thinking to look at, such that we've not been systematic in terms of doing how we do that. So we're trying to pay attention to everything equally rather than power standards or whatever in depth. And
Anybody else wants to talk one of these particularly not sticky at your school and why? Want to share?
I think that they are sticky, but kind of along those lines, I guess it's a question of what entrenched means. I think people really, really, really want to do it. It's in the execution of how to do it well and live up to it. That is what falters.
I think primary purpose is keywords in that in sections in number 2. And so we have the assessments and we use them to clarify where the students are and are they reaching where we expect them. But is the primary purpose of the assessment to inform our understanding of the scholar's thinking and plan an instructional response? No, not the primary purpose.
Got it. Okay. So, the data practices at AF. There are 5 essential practices. The use of BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, ownership of data, high quality analysis. For those of you that I've been meeting with, you've been doing your own self-diagnosis of your school along these things. Today's focus is really about high quality data days, which is one tenet among many. Let me orient you quickly to, oops, did I go to the next slide? We're going to do a case study. In your binders, you've got a number of materials that we're going to follow along with. If you go to slide tab 2, you'll see the essentials of data practice. You can come back and refer to those later. The next 3 pages, you'll see AF Middle School Data Day Composite, so a page that looks like this, followed by the observation log, followed by a note-taking tool. If you'll just open your binder and take out these 3 pieces of paper, you're going to need them to refer back to. We're going to do a case study. You are going to read a composite example of a middle school's data day from last year and some observations on how that data day played out. Using your note-taking tool, I want you to put yourself in the role of, I was observing this data day and I'm debriefing with the school leadership team. What is the 1 or 2 pieces of raise the bar feedback that I would give to that leadership team about how to make their day-to-day better? I know as a norm at AF and as a norm in coaching, we like to start with some positives and then jump to the raise the bars. I'm just going to assume we gave some positives. I really wanted to focus on how would you help this leadership team raise the bar at their day-to-day? So you're going to take 2 minutes to read, and then we'll just count off in 2. So 2, 2, 2, Tamika and Mary, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Read it, and then with your partner, I want you to come up with the 1 or 2 pieces of feedback you would share. Then we're going to have a share out with the group. We'll have a couple of groups share the 1 or 2 pieces of feedback. Does everyone understand the exercise?